Welcome back to Unspoken Emotions, the podcast where we explore the emotional experiences people often carry quietly beneath the chapters of their lives, the parts that shape who we become long before anyone else can see the change. Today's conversation is about shame, belonging, survival, illness, loss, and the unexpected ways life experiences can reshape the direction of our lives. My guest today is Gareth Riddy, whose journey has taken him through addiction, cancer at a young age, the loss of his mother, and ultimately into work centred around emotional healing and helping others rebuild their lives. So Gareth, welcome to the show, and thank you for being here to share your story with us today. How are you feeling today?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm good. I'm very well, thank you. Looking forward to this.
Good, I'm glad. Me too. Gareth, I always like to begin with taking you back then to sort of who you were and what life was like before the major life chapters, before illness, before recovery, and what life felt like emotionally. So when you think back to your younger years, before anything happened, what was life like for you, and what do you remember feeling the most strongly about inside?
To be honest, there was never any before illness because I was born a little bit ill. So when I was born, I was born kind of very premature, had to be incubated, all that type of stuff, and I grew up like quite a sickly kid. I was in and out of hospital with asthma and that type of stuff. I spent more time in hospital waiting rooms than anything else as a kid. So for me as a kid, kind of feeling helplessness and that shame thing came up a lot as a kid because I couldn't play with the other kids like I wanted to, so I couldn't play football and that type of stuff. So generally, I just felt kind of like weak and helpless and powerlessness. Generally, that was kind of the overarching theme from day dot, from what I remember. It wasn't like a super joyful running around laugh.
Yeah.
I did smile and laugh and that type of stuff, but definitely wasn't a vibrant childhood. That was for sure. So it started at birth, should we say.
Were there moments where you felt powerless or unsure of where you fitted in? Because you said, you felt some times where you weren't mixing.
Yeah, well, were there moments? Were there any moments when I didn't? Would be a better question. I never, ever, ever remember fitting in, ever. And as a kid, well, for probably at least the first 3 decades of my life, that was quite a painful thing. Now I'm like, yeah, it's amazing. Now I get it. Now I get it. Back then, I didn't.
How do you think you were presenting back then? When you look back now, it's difficult, obviously, when you're going through it as a child. But when you look back now, how was that coming out in you? When you felt like you didn't fit in and no real sense of belonging?
That's a hard question to answer because it's all I ever knew. I'd spend a lot of time on my own, reading, playing with toys. It was a single parent family. I was just me, so only child. So I would spend a lot of time on my own. I would kind of go and play with friends. They were there, but most of my time was spent on my own, really.
Yeah. Then we obviously there was you. So what came first? Was it the illness or was it the addiction?
The addiction, yeah. So that started at an early age. Well, not that early age, but because I was an unhealthy, unhappy kid, when you're unhappy, you look for pain management, right? So the first thing was crappy food. So I became like a little bit of an overweight kid. Food was my first drug, which eventually led to another drug, another drug, another drug, another drug. From Tipex spinners, lighter gas to weed to speed to through the whole rave thing, eventually into heroin, and on and on and on and on we go. So yeah, drugs came first. Self-medication, pain management.
Many people describe addiction not only as a physical experience, but an emotional search, I guess, for relief or connection or escape. Yeah. So when you look back now, what do you feel you were really searching for underneath that chapter of your life?
Definitely escape. Because I think because I always felt kind of powerless and weak, there's obviously a fear element to that. And when I was on drugs, depending on the drug, as I got older, it kind of enabled me to be a little bit more out there as well, a little bit more bold, a little more crazy and wild, So it kind of gave me that little bit of false confidence, or it would kind of make me really kind of reclusive, where I just kind of go off my own, just be out of it, and like soothing, I guess.
Yeah. What do you think? What emotions do you think were the hardest for you to sit with at those, during those times?
I can't really put my finger on it, to be honest, because it was just my state. I don't ever really remember not feeling it. You know, yeah, it was just normal. Like shame and guilt was my normal setting. I think fear probably. Fear's got a little more of a charge to it. It kind of gets a little more uncomfortable.
And what about other people around you then? Did you ever feel like the people around you understood what you were going through emotionally?
No, no, absolutely not. No, but also I didn't tell them. I didn't understand it. It's only now
Yeah.
looking back doing what I do. I'm like, oh yeah, duh. I can see it all mapped out. Step by step by step. But as a kid, that was all I knew. You know, and also I was on my own, single parent, that type of stuff. Only child, so there wasn't really anybody else to talk to. Or other than my mum. But it was not so much there wasn't anybody else to talk to, but because I grew up on my own, I didn't know how to communicate. There was my cousin, was a similar age to me, lived up the road, but he was very, very different personalities. So I guess I learned to just keep it in. That was just it.
It must have been incredibly hard for you, especially like as a child. What were your sort of coping mechanisms, or were you just not cope? Was it just the drugs that you were turning to, perhaps, to cope with all of that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was crap food, then it became drugs. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you mentioned as well about some of the emotions. One of them being shame. What did that look like for you?
Explain that. I don't know. I just remember that I never felt like good enough, like that there was something wrong with me. I just remember that because I grew up not being able to play with the kids like I wanted to. And I remember the PE lesson. I must have been about 8, something like that, so in junior school. And I said to the teacher, they're like, okay, everybody play football. I was like, oh, my worst thing because running, asthma, it would kick butt. And I said to my teacher, oh, I don't want to do that because I have to run around because of my asthma. Right, you can go and play with the girls then if you're going to be a girl. And then maybe do skipping with the girls just to add to the shame of it all. And that was quite a common sort of thing, you know. Yeah, but I can't pinpoint it because it just was. It was just that was my general state of being.
I think many people carry shame during addiction, and they often believe that they should be stronger or that they should be coping differently, when in reality there is usually like a much deeper emotional story underneath.
Yeah.
So was there a moment where you began to realize that change might be possible, even if, I suppose, you didn't yet know how it could happen?
Mm. So the drugs thing kind of happens. It was kind of forced upon me a little bit. So I was living on a traveller site back in the days when we had new age travellers with dreads and all that stuff, right? And I'd been out in the town, and when I came back, we'd only been on this site for a couple of days. The farmer had been around waving his shotgun around, telling everybody to get off his land, and I wasn't there, thankfully, but they all told me, and everyone was very scared and that type of stuff. So I walked down the local phone box, probably for a couple of miles, put 20p in, and went, Gran, can I come and live with you? And I did, but luckily they took me in. But it was fortunate that at the time I didn't have a heroin addiction, which I was so lucky that it didn't get that bad. But what happened was, because I was now away from the heroin site, essentially, it was a heroin site. It weren't all, but that was. I started doing speed to kind of change take my mind off it a little bit. And then I ended up with like a really, really bad speed habit, taking loads and loads of speed. And I ended up going to the drug advisory clinic to get the equivalent of methadone, the speed equivalent of methadone, dexamphetamine. So I go and get it every day from the chemist. So that kind of kick-started it. So it was a change in circumstances to change my drug. And then I thought, I know, I can get free drugs from them. That was my motivation. And then they started weaning me off it. And then, so things kind of changed bit by bit, by circumstance by circumstance. And once they'd kind of weaned me off it, I was like, oh, life had become very different because I was around different people. I was around old friends, around people that were a bit more sociable, that weren't just out of places on heroin. So it just changed bit by bit, you know. And then from there, I just started just smoking weed. And from there, life kind of got a little bit more fun, you know. And eventually, one of the big turning points for me for realising there was potentially another way, not another way to live, but to feel different, was I'd become a doorman because it was the only job I could do without having to get out of bed. And I'm a big dude. Being a doorman, being asthmatic and being a doorman doesn't really mix that well, right? Trying to throw people out and having inhaler breaks don't always go hand in hand. So there was a couple of occasions. And my boss said to me, join the fucking gym. So I joined the fucking gym. Joining the gym was like transformational for me. It was there that I first realised I had some control over myself. I started to feel fitter, feel healthier. I wasn't this asthmatic, frail fuck that I thought I was, right? And I started to get fitter and stronger. I was like, oh my God, maybe I'm not this victim that I thought I was. Maybe I actually have a little bit of control there. So that was hugely, hugely transformational. Then the cancer hit, and then that knocked out, and it took a little while to get back into it. But that was a big conscious turning point. The others were kind of little steps which guided me that way.
I mean, the gym is like really, you know, it's some people's idea of hell, and then it's other people's. It's just been their savior. It just depends on the individual, really, doesn't it? But so for you, I mean, obviously, it worked. It worked really well for you. And just, do you feel that it like kind of brought that discipline into your life? And
yeah, there's kind of been a big theme in my life that when I feel shit and I find a way to feel less shit, I'm not very good at going backwards into feeling shit again. So my whole life really has been a search to not feel shit. That's kind of been it. That's been the underlying driver. That's what drove me to the drugs, what drove me to the gym, and here now.
yeah. And then obviously you've mentioned then that later life brought another major turning point for you, and facing cancer at a young age as well. So can you take us back to the moment where you first realized what you were facing? What do you remember feeling emotionally at that time?
Yeah, that was crazy. So I'd had like a big cyst come up in my neck. Like I'd had the mumps, but only on one side. I went to the doctors and they lanced it and sucked it all out and that type of stuff. And they were like, okay, there's a little bit in there we need to take out, but we'll take out in a few weeks' time, 6 weeks' time. I think it was probably a few months by the time they did it. And when they did take it out, then I woke up with this like huge scar on my neck, like bigger than, like the thing was about that big, but the scar was like, you know, this huge thing here. And I woke up seeing all these stitches. And I was like, cool. I've got a great big scar, 24 years old. Wicked, I've got one up. And then I had a checkup probably a week or so later. And the doctor says, Doctor, surprise, you've got cancer. Didn't quite do it that way. But I wasn't expecting it. Obviously, I was sort of going in for a checkup after having this op. Very small op at that, so I thought. And I just remember at that time, I can't really delineate differentiate the difference between the emotion, but all it happens is kind of got tunnel vision, everything kind of went, I couldn't really hear or see anything. And I just remember the bus journey home being like really long. And it didn't really get emotional until I got back to my grounds, and then I had to tell the family. And then yeah, obviously I was crying, they were crying, everyone was crying, etc., etc. So that was kind of when it really first hit, like the fear.
Do you think there were fears that you carried privately that you didn't express to others at the time?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I thought I was going to die. Yeah, didn't tell anyone.
And then you were having treatment, and I know that you've mentioned being surrounded by patients that were much older than you during your treatment. How did that feel? What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, it was really weird. It was really surreal. I was 24 years old, and at the time, I was the youngest person ever to have that particular kind of cancer. It was considered an old person's type of cancer. So they used me in textbooks, apparently, according to my mum, who knew the surgeon, so claim to fame. So I was in the radiotherapy unit, Guildford. And it was just, everybody was just old and tubed up their nose. Some of them were wheeled in, some of them were yellow. And there's me, 24 years old, like, hi. Kind of a little bit kind of lively, but also it's a scary thing, right? Being surrounded by all that. I'm like in death's waiting room, but at this age. And when you're in it, and also like the energy of the room holds emotion, right? So it's holding everybody's woes. So it was a really heavy environment to be in anyway. And it started off kind of quite scary, but then after the first kind of couple of weeks, you just kind of get used to it, just crack on. It stopped being scary for me. Probably by the time treatment was really up and running, the first couple of weeks, and then it was just a case of, I'm going to be all right, let's just go with it. And then I think it was more difficult for my family at that point. By now, I'd kind of accepted it and was just doing it. What choice did I have?
Did that experience change how you saw life, I guess, and time?
Definitely.
Because we all think we've all got this, infinite amount of time, or that we're going to live till we're 80, 90, 100 or whatever. And then here you are, aged 24, was it?
Yeah.
And this is what you're faced with. How did that kind of hit you, and change how you felt about your life and time?
I think because of my history, being in and out of hospital, asthma attacks, all that stuff, and waiting rooms, that I was kind of lucky. Like I'd had a head start in being in that environment, that being not well, So I was kind of blessed in that respect. That had I been kind of super fit and healthy and then had it, I think it would have knocked me very, very differently. So I'd had a head start in feeling like arse, essentially. But without a doubt, it's one of the best moments of my life. Without a doubt, without a doubt. I tell people that without exception, the biggest, most painful moments of my life held the biggest gifts every single time, and that was one of the big ones. It gave me like a real good appreciation. It's like, okay, so life now needs to change, and it did. And the funny thing was, at the time, I was actually getting fit. I was in the gym, I was getting fit, I was in good shape. I thought I was getting healthier. So it took me probably another couple of years after treatment to start getting back into the gym again. So I went through like a bit of a period of oddness, just generally just grateful, just living, happy to just do anything really. Not happy, but grateful, just accepting. That's a better word.
I think a lot of people have a lot of people who've suffered from life-changing illnesses have described that they felt a sense of appreciation for the actual illness, what it changed in their life, like how it changed their view on life, and how they stopped kind of they stopped seeing things in a certain way. They just like stopped sweating the small things, just had a real thirst for life then, and all the little things that they would have been getting bogged down with on a day-to-day basis. That meant nothing anymore. They just saw this bigger picture. Was that true for you, or what how were you feeling?
It was, but not straight away. So after the treatment, I was just kind of living. So I was happy. When I had like radiotherapy, and during the radiotherapy, because it was a throat, it's just like a long X-ray essentially, but the burns build up over time. So it became really, really painful to eat, and I was struggling to keep my weight up, which they wanted me to keep my weight a certain way, because they make a mold of a mask, and they line up the radio waves with the mask. But because I was losing weight, the mask didn't fit as well as it could have done. So you're encouraged to keep weight up. So I was trying to eat ice cream and all these type of things, but it hurt so much. And I think my first bit of gratitude was, oh my God, it doesn't hurt to drink water. It doesn't hurt to eat ice cream. I put on a load of weight. I was like, oh my God, I can eat again. That was the most impactful thing at that time. Once my throat stopped hurting, I was like, oh, calories again. I can have a beer. Great, all that type of stuff. So I didn't get into a healthy lifestyle. I got into a less than healthy lifestyle. And it wasn't until a few years later that I eventually got back into the gym. And then after that, I decided to become a personal trainer. So initially, when the cancer first hit, I wanted to become a personal trainer. I was looking at studying, boom, it happened. And then when I finally got back into the gym again, I started looking into that. And then the appreciation when I started getting fitter and healthy again, then it kind of really hit me. And I think that kind of drove a big part of my career path. You know, was I became insatiable learning about health and performance and feeling better, etc., etc.
Would you say that obviously having that diagnosis and having that going through that treatment just changed your perspective on life?
Of course, yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So what did you see differently? What changed for you?
All of it, you know. Yeah, well, it stopped. When I started getting back to the gym, it changed because I no longer felt like that victim. You know, I think the big part of it was I just felt very grateful and also kind of blessed that I'd experienced something that other people hadn't. It kind of felt like added cool points to my story almost, you know. So that was kind of interesting. Yeah, and then it was just a case of bit by bit by bit, it just moved forward.
And then you, following on from that chapter in your life, you also shared something else which was very powerful, and that was the guilt that you carried after your mother passed away, and how that quietly influenced how you showed up in your work.
Yeah.
So when did you first begin to realise how deeply that guilt was shaping your actions?
I think it was around about lockdown time, something like that. I was working a lot with like pain and brain function and chronic health stuff. And what was happening was I was burning myself out a little, but I was giving myself away a lot to clients. And whenever I couldn't get the results I wanted, I felt really guilty, and I'd start overgiving. And it wasn't until I kind of looked back, I was like, oh shit! And I was just thinking about it one day. I was like, shit, that guilt, that's my mum. You know, all of those people are my mum because at the time when my mum got ill, I was a personal trainer. I should have known better. I tried to get to do stuff. I couldn't, etc., etc. So I felt kind of guilty about that, right? But then parked it, didn't think about it consciously, obviously, but subconscious is a driver. And that really drove me into the healing realms, which I became from a personal trainer. You know, I started learning about pain and health, etc., and it became what it is today. But it wasn't until I really kind of started looking at the emotions and how they drive that the penny dropped. I was like, oh, now I can see what I've been doing. Every single client has been my mum. And when I went into that and healed it myself and I did my own shit, and let go, oh, it was amazing. Like my clients changed because you draw in people based on where you're at, right? So I always brought in these really difficult ones quite a lot. As soon as I let go of that and let go of the pressure of myself, it meant that I could think clearer anyway because my brain was less stressed. But it also meant that different people came towards me, and it moved me away from the health side so much because I was working so much with the health and the chronic health and pain and etc. And I wanted a way out of it. You know, the emotional stuff was what I really loved doing. And when I kind of realised that, kind of shifted it for me. I was like, oh, there we go.
What emotions do you think surfaced when you finally recognised that connection?
I was like, oh my God, like, duh, after all these years, you know, I had to process the grief, not the grief, the guilt. I guess there was a bit of grief there as well, but not a lot because I processed that quite early. I'm very, very lucky that. So my mum, she was a music teacher, like a piano teacher and a singing teacher. And before she died, she recorded a lot of music of her singing, this music that she wrote and sung. So when she died, I spent a lot of time listening to that. And she's got a very, very distinctive voice. I may be a little bit biased, but very powerful voice. So it just meant I just cried so much of it out and had that connection. And I think that helped me so much in terms of processing the grieving instead of stuffing it down. So that was a huge thing for me.
Do you think that's what helped you begin, like, releasing some of that weight? Was listening to those? Yeah.
Yeah, I just spent like the whole night just crying, you know. And when she died, that was the first night I actually had a real good night's sleep in years. In years. It was crazy. But yeah, that was instrumental. I'm very, very blessed to have had that, because some people don't have that, you know.
No, that's right. That's right. I think many people discover emotions that they thought I, that they thought were resolved, are still influencing their lives in like subtle ways. So, what was it like emotionally to recognize that this was happening?
I was very glad of it. I was very glad of it, because at the time I was working towards what I'm doing now, and I look at it with a kind of a sense of curiosity now. Like whenever I find anything new that I've been hanging on to, I'm like, oh, finally, there it is. Oh, brilliant. And I've learned not to take my emotions personally, which is great. So yeah, just relief. I was like, oh, brilliant. Now I can go in and do my stuff and help it process for the body. I'm like, oh, yeah, have a bit of a breather. But that's me, because I do what I do.
But that's really interesting where you say I learned not to take my emotions personally. How do you do that?
Well, I tell people I'm an emotional laxative, right? Helping people let go, process emotions. I have my own methods physiologically moving through the nervous system, right? Like I guess it's kind of somatic. So I've learned to kind of detach from them, old ones, that is. When they resurface, there are times I get caught up in it 100%, I'm not going to pretend that I don't. But when I clock it, I'm like, okay. And then I can address it, and then I feel much better. So when stuff surfaces, like let's say some old shame or guilt or whatever, I now look at it more as, oh, brilliant. Now get to process something. Now I get to free up a little bit more of my energy, my nervous system, my psyche, you know. And it's been a massive part of my development of my game. I love it.
What do you think? I mean, that's like where you are now, which is an amazing place to be. But for obviously some other people out there who may be in the place of perhaps where you were, what would be your advice to them?
So it sounds trite, and you already said it, is don't take your emotions personally, right? Emotions are a process. You know, there's kind of a start and an end to it. It's like breathing. It's a process, right? You're meant to continue. It's a normal process, and when we interrupt that process, that's when it becomes a problem. When we stuff it down, when we don't let it fully process, right? Then it has physical, cognitive, behavioural implications. So the other thing I say to people is emotions can't hurt you. Right? It's the emotions that you refuse to heal are the ones that are going to fuck you up. Or the emotions you refuse to feel, I should say. So for those that can and are willing to sit in it and feed it to its completion, let it dissipate. Do that. For those that can't, find somebody that can help you, do it, because there's loads of different modalities and stuff with people that can help, you know. Because what is incomplete needs to be completed in your emotions, in all of us, and all the stuff that's been stuck down counts. And once you've let go, once that has fully processed, it's like it never hurt at all. So, oh God, it changes your memory, right? Because emotions and memory go hand in hand. When the emotional charge is gone, the memory looks very different. So that's kind of like,
As men in particular, we spoke before we came live and on air, and we had the chat, and we said, men are notorious for not talking and not dealing with the emotional side of things that they go through. So how, and then obviously the impact of that can be catastrophic. Men's suicide rates are just so high, especially in comparison to women, and they're just too high, and a lot of it is because they don't process perhaps what they're feeling. They don't go through. They don't talk. What would you say to people who are really struggling before they get to that crisis point? How can you help other men to just talk and share and open up and not be, allow themselves, I guess, to be vulnerable?
yeah. So my thought on it is find a physical outlet first, because emotions are like a physiological thing, right? And trying to talk your way through an emotion isn't always that easy, particularly for men that are more physical. So if you can find some kind of physical outlet, it will be easier to talk about things. Also, it takes some of the charge away, right? Because emotions existed long before our ability to talk. So it's an older part of our physiology, right? Before we learn to make language and make sense of it. Priority number one is find some kind of physical outlet, whether it be walking, running, beating your pillow up, boxing, gym, whatever. It doesn't really matter. So, something that kind of works, you can kind of let some of that energy out. Because for men, when they talk, they tend to really kind of just groove it in deeper sometimes. Because then there's the shame of talking about it as well, you know. And if it's different for a woman. If a woman has a cry with her friend, yay, we're all good. The man has a cry with his friend. Now he's got the shame of the crying as well, you know. So it kind of stacks up. So talking isn't always the best for men. It is recommended, but it's not always the optimum route. So my advice is find some kind of physical outlet, whether it be breath work or there's loads of different ways, and then find somebody you can talk with.
Mm-hmm. That's really powerful.
I found, for me, a big instrumental thing for me was MMA, fighting jiu-jitsu, where I was doing the physical things like I should do as a man, right? I say, you know, very stereotypical. But there's a rough and tumble element, which most men are kind of geared up towards. But you're around other people that do that too. And there's something around those kind of communities where the people, they're all kind of in it together. They're used to facing stuff together. So you tend to, if you're lucky, have kind of deeper conversations and make different kind of bonds, you know, than down the pub over a pint. So that helped me a lot.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That's really, really powerful, and I hope that will help some guys out there who might be listening to the show. Just then touching on healing, and we spoke, and you said that healing didn't happen in one dramatic moment, but gradually, almost by shifting from one stage of life into another. So what were the biggest emotional shifts that helped you move from survival into the work that you now do, helping others?
I think a big part of my driver early on what was that shame and that guilt, right? So you're trying to kind of not feel so powerless and helplessness, and you're trying to get away from that shame. So that kind of became a bit of a driving force. And then it just became a little bit of you to try and avoid the pain that you felt was really it. You know, there weren't any huge, I've got to feel this now, I have to move. It was just a gradual process, like I said. But there were key moments, such as the cancer was a key moment. I had an asthma attack where I had to be revived. I very, very nearly died, stopped breathing, all that type of stuff. When I was 26, I was very lucky that I was with my girlfriend at the time. I woke up in the middle of the night, said get an ambulance, got myself to the floor, and that was it. I was out. And I was out for about 3/4 of an hour, like unconscious, not breathing, and she had to do all that stuff, CPR stuff. And then the first thing I knew about was the paramedics were there. And that was obviously another big shift for me. Although emotionally at the time, you just have the attack, you panic, and you pass out. But that definitely kind of gave me a second chance. It also made me realise I was in a relationship that I didn't want to be in. As well. But, you know, thanks for saving my life, but laters. But but she was the first relationship I got in after the cancer.
Right, okay.
So you should want someone, anyone, you know, no offense to hearing this, but it just wasn't, you know, we'll call it an evolutionary path. So that became a big driver. After that, kind of like, okay, like, this isn't life. I've been given a second chance here. Now, you know, I need to do something else. And I think it was from there that I then got back into the gym.
Right. Okay.
And then I was like, oh my God, now I've got a bit of power. And then I started learning, and then the learning just became obsessive.
On your journey, what beliefs about yourself changed along the way?
All of them. All of them. So tackling beliefs is a big thing that I do. I love it. I go crazy for it. So many have gone, and I can give you a broader. So obviously the old classics: I'm not good enough, I'm weak, um, I'm unworthy, I'm not worthy of love, I don't love myself, all that type of stuff. Um, if I help others feel better, then I'll feel safe. That was a belief in itself, so that was a kind of a big driver. Then people will love me. Um, a huge belief that I was kind of inadequate and incapable and powerless. And actually, this was really interesting. What happened to me only very recently was I read a thing somewhere. I can't remember who it was, but someone was saying that your beliefs will show up in your dreams. And I was like, ooh. So I started looking at it through my emotional laxative lens. And it must have been probably about 2 nights after that, I had a dream. I can't remember the details, but I was trying to get away from something. And this was been a theme in my dreams throughout my life. Is if I'm trying to get away from something or trying to get somewhere quickly, not always away from something scary, it's just there was some kind of hastiness to my dream. What would happen is I'd start running, I'd lose the ability to run. Then I'd start walking, I'd lose the ability to walk. Then I'd end up crawling, and then I'd lose the ability to crawl. And I was just gradually getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And then I woke up, so, oh my God, believe, pay attention to that, pay attention to that. And then the next morning, I kind of sat with that and I dug it out and I was like, oh my God. I had this underlying belief, which I've probably carried my entire life, that I was powerless, that I was weak, and which showed in my dream, because I progressively got weak and had no power. Oh, that's really interesting. So I dealt with that and I tackled it. And I haven't had a dream like that since. And we're talking at least twice a week for as long as I can remember. So that was probably the most dramatic because I saw the change there and then. And now my dreams are kind of quite nice and quite good. And I still have a few little ones, but then I pick out whatever's in it. So that was, I'm going to say that's the most impactful one because it was the most obvious, you know.
So with all these with all these like limiting beliefs then that you had back then at that time, what sort of helped you to begin trusting yourself again?
What I do now. What I do now. I think it started with the gym because I believed I had a little bit more strength than I thought I had. Then when I started learning to become a personal trainer, that I had more knowledge. So that was kind of building it. And then when I got into training MMA and I was grappling a lot, I then got more. So it was coming through the physical, which then was allowing me more space because when you feel safer physically, you then start to feel safer emotionally. If you're unsafe physically, you're going to feel unsafe emotionally. Right? This is why I say find a physical outlet. Because if your body doesn't feel safe, you're not going to feel emotionally safe. It's called mind, body, soul for a reason. So that bit by bit helped me get more trust in myself, get trust myself in the gym, I was getting trust in myself in the mat, sparring, all that type of stuff. And that bit by bit developed it. And then I went to a big personal development event in 2016, I think. It was like 800 people in this room, and we did like this inner child thing for like 3 hours, and then you're hugging your own inner child, and you're crying, and it's this huge room at the Excel. So that was, of course, another big turning point. And after that, I was like, from then I became obsessed about beliefs and digging those out. And that eventually, bit by bit, here we are, still doing it, but in my own way.
Brilliant. I love it. I love it. When we talk about emotional healing, what does that actually mean to you today compared to what you once believed?
Yeah, emotional healing to me today just means completing the incomplete, processing the unprocessed, metabolizing whatever it is, the physical tension and charge of what that emotion is. Because in my mind, the thinking mind is a consequence of your emotional state, right? So all sensory information goes into your emotional sense first before it gets into your brain, your conscious brain. Your conscious brain is an interpretation of your emotional state, past and present. So you can't outthink how you feel. Yeah. And when you start to change and now these physiological processes happen in whichever avenue you choose, then the thinking starts to follow. It's why like mindset work on its own is really difficult, because they're trying to battle with a deeper part, the emotions. So yeah, for me, emotional healing is just feeling the unfelt or moving the incomplete in whichever way that it is. Letting it dissipate and get more energy back into the nervous system and a healthier.
So tell us more about what you do now, and how you help others.
Yeah, so I like to say I'm an emotional laxative, help people let go of old emotional shit so they stop spraying it over their future. That's what I do day to day with my clients. Help people do this kind of stuff. We'll be tackling emotions or where it comes up as patterns of internal resistance or beliefs, or people struggling with business or relationships, or they have the inability to love themselves or whatever. My thing is, I'm not so interested about the story, I'm interested about the feeling underneath. Because you change your feeling, the story changes. That's kind of my bag. So that's what I do. Also, what I teach as well. I've recently started teaching it.
What sort of scenarios do you see that keep coming up, like this classic, time after time, from your clients, that is just so common that probably perhaps some other people wouldn't realise?
Yeah, a big one is which comes up a lot is people feeling that they should be quiet. That they can't take up space in the world. That's a huge one. Particularly with women. Guys, it tends to be much more of a weakness type thing, a powerlessness type thing. But also trying to get everything right. So when people are trying to get everything right, or they become perfectionists, or they really sabotage themselves. I had somebody who, for years, was kind of very put down by the family, and she had to become the quiet one. And it meant that she never really spoke out. She tried to keep herself small, but she did everything for everybody and nothing for herself. Yeah, and ended up really ill, which is a very, very common thing. Or guys just clam up. I have more women than guys, unsurprisingly.
Yeah. Yep. Because women talk a bit more, and women are not as I guess we're not as fearful of being vulnerable, but there is still that vulnerability within us all. But I think women are more inclined to tackle it and talk about it and deal with it than men are.
Well, women talk more anyway, generally, right? Just use more words.
That's right.
So they're used to it. Guys, not quite so much. Or kind of what
Yeah.
But luckily, what I do doesn't involve talking. People do, but we don't have to. We're just looking for where's that resistance come from. Sometimes we don't even need to know. We just know there's pain there. Okay, let's process it. Oh, now nurses not getting me avoiding stuff.
Yeah. Amazing. I love that you have turned your pain definitely into passion, and are you using that now to really help other people overcome what they're going through and the pains that they're going through. And obviously you can relate to many of that, having gone through so much yourself. So amazing. Well done. I think it's amazing what you do. So yeah, absolute credit to you. Well done. Gareth, before we finish, there's one or two things that I ask many of my guests, and one of them is what's one of the, we've talked about the emotions that you felt growing up and going through the different chapters of your life, but what's the one unspoken emotion that you perhaps carried for years that you're only now beginning to understand differently?
That's a good question. I have no idea. Because I'll happily speak them now. The ones that I find. So yeah, like I said, shame and apathy were big ones, and fear they were my huge ones. Yeah, it was just like a huge shame of not being good enough and being weak. That was kind of it, Kept in friend zone with the girls, always trying to be their friend, and that was because I always felt helplessness and guilt and shame. And fear was a huge one as well. I was so scared as a kid a lot. Like if I was like walking home on my own, I'd see some kids across the other side of the street, live in an alley and run, and then realised that I was asthmatic and probably shouldn't do that. But fear was a big driver as a kid. And then when I became a doorman, it was still a big driver for a very, very long time. And it wasn't until I read I read a book by a guy called Jeff Thompson called Watch My Back, who was a doorman. And his was the first of those hard men books that I read. He talked about fear and his own childhood, and he was really into personal development and that type of stuff. And he was the first person that ever admitted it in one of those books. I was like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was terrified every night. Well, not every night. Some nights you're just really bored, or you're just dicking around having a laugh. Yeah, they're the ones. They're the ones. But none of it's unspoken, but they're all out there.
And if you could sit beside the younger version of you, the one who felt that shame, that fear, powerless or unsure of where he belonged, what would you want him to hear today?
I would say, this shit right now, hang in there, he's going to do some fucking amazing stuff. You're going to do some shit with this shit, I'm telling you, sunshine. It's all part of the road. That's basically it. And I love you.
Brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Gareth, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and for looking back on it with such honesty and reflection. Conversations like this just simply remind us that behind every chapter people see from the outside, there is an emotional journey that often unfolds quietly underneath. So yeah, really, really heartfelt thank you for sharing everything that you have today. I really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome.
Pleasure.
Thank you. And to everyone listening, if today's conversation resonated with you, please remember that healing is rarely a single moment. It's often a gradual process of understanding ourselves differently, one layer at a time. If this episode spoke to you, please share it with someone who may need to hear it and follow the podcast so that these conversations continue reaching the people who need them the most. Remember, as always, there is strength in every step and courage in every story. Until next time, big love.